United States just yesterday on Monday, or I think maybe on Sunday, they came out saying that they've designated Yemen's Houthi movement or the Yemen's Houthis as a terrorist organization. So the first thing that came to my mind was like I was surprised that they hadn't done this before. Maybe I thought they would have done it. And then I was thinking, what could possibly be the repercussions? What could be the practical repercussions of this? And I was thinking, I don't think there's any real peace movement or like deal going on in Yemen. I think that both sides are very far, all three sides, every side involved, are very far from making any kind of deal. So it doesn't hamper it too much there, I would perhaps, but I think it's probably going to be just very devastating for just normal Yemenis who rely on really on imports and aid. So I think like Yemen imports something like 80 or 90% of its food. This was even before the war. They're really reliant on imports. And now, of course, when there were talks of the US perhaps designating the Houthis as a rebel organization, I had read that the head of the World Food Program came out and also the head of Oxfam, they both said that how, it would be devastating if the US labels them as a terrorist organization. And they gave the example of Somalia and saying that, once this happened, if you label and they also pointed out how the Houthis actually, they're really in power in half the country and, including like the capital is under them. They run ministries, they run all kinds of things. So if they're labeled as a terrorist organization, it really makes their life hard for, just giving out aid. And, maybe the Saudis are done with bombing the country for now at least, and so are the Emiratis. But the humanitarian situation, as the UN always says, is just catastrophic in Yemen. But yeah, that was quite devastating. And Sam, so I was thinking, okay, so just last week, they announced that Saudi Arabia and Qatar are putting their differences behind, and we're going to get more into this. But the first thing that came to my mind is that the US and Trump gave this and did this for Saudi Arabia in exchange for them making that agreement with Qatar, like then last week. What do you think? Do you think I'm onto something or not really?
To be honest, I mean, perhaps I don't know, they may have become happier because of this, but maybe not. I mean, Saudi feelings are not completely. I mean, when we talk about Saudis, there are different factions. Some of them actually may want peace with the Houthis. I think, to be honest, designating Houthis as terrorist group had more to do with American internal politics and the fact that Trump wants to show that he's a hardliner, and the fact that they want to even further deteriorate the relationship between Iran and US. Make it again, make America's hand stronger in future. So this is another card they can play in future negotiations. So, and to be honest, as you said, it was surprising that it hadn't happened yet. And it was largely because of humanitarian concerns, or at least concerns about the, people making noise about humanitarian issues. So I don't see that much connection with the Saudi Saudi Qatar deal. Although I would say I think it's part like the it's part of larger. Trump has been doing a lot of things regarding Middle East and Israel, and some say it's because he wants to run again and he wants the backing of Israeli lobby. Some say it's because Pompeo wants to run and he wants the backing of the Israeli lobby. But he's been doing a lot of things that are in favor of Saudi-Israeli relations in the last few months, including even the Abraham Accords. You could argue was something, although that was before the elections.
I mean,
And so I think
100%.
these moves should all be seen as a part of like that. Like even the Saudi Qatar deal, which we talk about in a second, was basically reports are that America was pushing for it, and Trump wanted this to happen before he leaves office. He wanted to be the one who uh, resolve this issue, or at least take the credit for it. So yeah, I think it's just another move in that regard. I don't think it's yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, 100%. He's given so many parting gifts to Arab countries, or at least, Arab leaders of countries such as Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, and of course Israel. And one reason that just came to my head, I was thinking this because I was watching BBC and they had their Focus Africa program, and the guest made a very just a very decent point. I don't think it was very like very far fetched or anything. Basically, his point was just that Trump has only met, I believe, two African leaders during his 4 years that he was there. I mean, even other previous administrations, it's not like they go and meet with African leaders all the time. But his point was that Trump always, the only way he thinks is like, I'll do one favor for you and you do a favor back for me. So he mentioned that the two countries, one of them is they were trying to sell airplanes and jets to them, not sure what, and the other one was Sudan. So he said that he meant with the Sudan leaders because he told them, hey, make a deal with Israel and we will remove you from the terrorist list, which of course was devastating for Sudan. So this one just seemed like, it kind of fell into that kind of Trump's thinking. He's like, okay, fine, you guys make an agreement right now and we say that I did it, and yeah, I'll label them as terrorist organization if that's what you want. But yeah, there are all these other compelling reasons as why he would have done it. But his negotiation is just always on like based on one thing, that's as far as his brain and thinking goes, it seems.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, anyway, it's an interesting move. It
Yeah.
won't help obviously the Yemeni people, but Yemeni situation has basically evolved into a stalemate now.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not real. It's just a war of attrition and a very shitty situation. So
No,
it's just
horrible,
got a bit,
exactly.
it just got a little bit worse.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, yeah, that's what I was saying in the beginning. So apparently, it will of course make it harder to also negotiate with a terrorist organization. But I mean, there's not much negotiations going on right now in Yemen, I would assume. It's probably the food and the imports that will be hit the hardest, if anything. But okay, so let's move on to the Qatar-Saudi agreement, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is a news that got massive coverage. So
Yeah,
again, everybody probably knows all the details. But yeah, as Saudi, about 3 years ago, Saudi government led a coalition of Arab and Muslim nations on a blockade against Qatar because they accused Qatar of fostering and supporting terrorism and cooperating with Iran. And they demanded, there was a list of demands. I think you're going to talk about it specifically. There was a major list of demands, and they said that there is going to be a full blockade until these demands are met. Finally, they reached a deal, and they basically they've come to the deal hasn't been published in details, but the blockade has ended. Flights are taking place, borders are opened, and the blockade included some of the most important countries that were blockading Qatar were Saudi, UAE, Bahrain, um, if I'm not mistaken, Egypt, couple of other African nations, I believe. So quite a few number of Arab nations were blocking Qatar. So, and you know, uh, as far as I can tell, Qatar hadn't met any of those demands. So it seems, as far as I can see, a clear win for Qatari government. Uh, and reports are Kuwaiti government played a key role in um, negotiating peace between Saudis and Qataris. There were a couple of interesting things in his speech. Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi de facto Saudi leader, said that in the face of, especially in the face of growing threat of Iran, Arab nations and Arab brothers need to come together to stand against Iran. So that's the way he put it. At the same time, the foreign minister of Qatar came out and said that while they agreed on security cooperation with other Arab nations, that does not affect their foreign relations with Iran whatsoever. So yeah, that's about it. Um,
yeah.
it's an
For me,
interesting
the
deal.
major thing is really what you just touched on. So can you just talk about a little bit more any reactions coming out of Iran? What do you think? Because I mean, that was the first thing that came to my mind is that now that the agreement has been reached, is there going to be any difference in the relationship between Qatar and Iran, who are of course much closer and not at war, like the UAE and Saudi Arabia are with Iran?
Iran, to be honest, interestingly, somewhat has been somewhat quiet on the issue. Although Iran has been busy with its own issues regarding Corona and economy and all that, but they haven't really responded. But I don't think they care too much, to be honest, because they would have assumed it would have happened anyway soon. So no, they haven't really responded in any way, or I haven't really seen any responses from Iranian government. But I would think they're not. It's Iran does not really view these small Arab nations. I think Iranian government does not view them as independent actors so much. So because of that, I think they don't really like. They're neither too happy or sad about it.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I mean, that's good to hear for now. So you mentioned the 13 demands. I'll just like read over a few of them quickly. And I mean, it's just so funny. Not a
Sure.
single one of them were met. I was reading this article in Bloomberg and it was saying how the Saudis have come out and said, this list was meant to, to really push the negotiations and like get the best out of like whatever a little feud, but then the guys like you guys didn't get absolutely anything out of it, so it's kind of hard to say like how you cornered the Qataris with those 13 demands. But honestly, when you kind of read them, it sounds like like two kids put it together, like okay, let's make a list of demands. Okay, start with the funniest ones are of course the Al Jazeera ones that obviously did not happen. So number 6 was straight up shut down Al Jazeera and its affiliate stations. That hasn't happened. What else do they have? So of course the first one is the major one that we just talked about, and I mean if they didn't achieve anything there, so that's the biggest failure. So number 1 was to scale down diplomatic ties with Iran and close the Iranian diplomatic missions in Qatar. So that's really the main one that they failed. The second one, had you heard about this? And I don't think anything happened here either, which is to immediately shut down the Turkish military base, which was in 2017 under
Oh yeah.
construction. Is that's still going,
Oh
right?
yeah.
That's still happening?
I mean, more than Iran, Qatar is far closer to Turkey because they are both Sunni as well. And yeah, Turkey had a military. Turkey exports a lot of raw materials and dairy goods and that type of thing to Qatar. So to be honest, Turkey was a big winner. Turkey and to a lesser extent Iran were the big winner of this blockade, economically speaking. So yeah, that was a big issue as well.
Yeah, and then the other demands are pretty much to, end interference in sovereign countries' internal affairs. Like, okay, some like vague stuff. But I love number 12. I actually hadn't seen this, I guess, properly before. Agreed to all demands within 10 days of list being submitted to Qatar, or the list will become invalid. So, okay, so that's
Oh
why
wow.
actually they didn't met any of them. I love that.
I mean, it
There's
wasn't
nothing
within
there to
10
see,
days. Oh,
people. Let's move on. Okay. Here's a list of demands. You have 5 minutes. Go. Okay, never mind. I won anyway. You. But what do
Imagine.
you think were the South? What do you think?
Yeah, let's
But yeah, why do you think last week this all happened? Like, why not 2 months ago or in 3 months? I guess just the usual reason of Trump at this time like pushing them and making them happen, and the Saudis seeing that this isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, I think Saudis realize that if Biden administration comes in, they
Yeah.
might have to even Qatar may
Yeah.
make a list of demands or something. So yeah,
Hey,
because of
someone
that,
pointed it
they
out that in one
uh,
of the debates, what did Biden said something that American politicians don't usually say about Saudis. They said that they're I can't remember, but do you remember that he said that they're like a problematic state, or he said something along those
Yeah, yeah.
lines.
Mr. Vice President, the CIA has concluded that the leader of Saudi Arabia directed the murder of U.S.-based journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The State Department also says the Saudi government is responsible for executing nonviolent offenders and for torture. President Trump has not punished senior Saudi leaders. Would you?
Yes, and I said it at the time. Khashoggi was, in fact, murdered and dismembered, and I believe in the order of the Crown Prince. And I would make it very clear, we were not going to, in fact, sell more weapons to them. We were going to, in fact, make them pay the price and make them, in fact, the pariah that they are.
Yeah, yeah. He said he's gonna cut off ties to them, cut off aids to them completely if they don't adhere to, like, stop, breaking international law regarding Yemen and all that.
Yeah. I mean, with the Biden administration, it's just that all these deals, even if they were going to happen, they would just take a much longer time. They couldn't just be announced in the way that Trump is doing it and all this. So I guess right now was the best time to get this. Yeah. They would come under a lot of scrutiny.
Sure.
Otherwise, under the Biden administration. Okay, so do you have anything else to talk about here? You talked about the role of Kuwait, so the Kuwaitis rather than Trump played a big role in facilitating. I can believe that, of course. Then you said that you think that Egypt were part of the blockade, and they were. And it's funny, you never hear Egypt. They're always like the +1 that are part of these things these days, but they never come out and talk about it. So you don't remember that they're part of these blockades or actions or whatever.
Well, Egypt is sometimes regarded as Saudi's army, so we should, and they're the most populous Arab nation, I believe, Arabic-speaking nation at least.